All right, welcome back, everybody. Sam the Electrician here, talking about Western independence and Alberta separation. Thanks for joining me again. I had the misfortune or the fortune to read a news article this morning that took one of my topics from last night's video, the finance minister resigning, and it expands on why. And I wasn't aware, so it's very enlightening and enraging article for me to read. So I'm going to share my findings with you, and I think everyone who has any kind of leanings to getting out of the country, this will certainly help push you out the door even faster, and may convince people who were never on board before to come along. So the finance minister resigned the other day, and apparently it was in protest for the proposed changes that Trudeau wants to make to the financial system of this country. It's not just a budget, I guess, coming out in the fall. It's much more than that. He used the words like legacy. And, when people come up with these legacy ideas, they're far-reaching and changing, and they like to mold things in what they think should be a new way of doing things, which is always dangerous coming from the left. So today's episode is Trudeau's budget versus freedom. And what freedom, people would ask. Well, it's a fundamental freedom, the freedom and the right to keep the fruits of your own labor. And not to have the federal government redistribute your wealth that you earned and you worked for. This is basically communism light, in my opinion, or heavy socialism. Our country is already socialist hellhole, as I refer to it to my friends. So, for a libertarian and an individualist, we're already living in basically a communist police state. So, to make it, to pile on and make it even worse, it's just terrible for Albertans and Westerners in general, conservatives, libertarians. So what has me all worked up today? Well, I'm going to quote from the article quite a bit here to make sure I get it right and accurate. So, according to Reuters news service, the government is planning to, quote, sweeping changes to the country's social welfare system and a series of economic measures that will align Canada with ambitious climate goals. This, of course, can only run contrary to Alberta's interests and the interests of most Westerners, anyone in the energy industry, and all the connected services and even manufacturing down east that have contracts to supply us out here with our needs. All of that is in danger, apparently. Trudeau has said, quote, the pandemic has unmasked fundamental gaps in society, and so dies meritocracy right there. Once the federal government believes that it's its job to even out the gaps in a capitalist or so-called capitalist society, you're in trouble. They believe it's their job to decide who gets your money. Even more so than they do now. That Morneau resigned over this alone shows like how sweeping these changes are going to be. And of course, he's been replaced with the vehement social justice warrior, Russian art history major journalist Chrystia Freeland. No credentials whatsoever to be a finance minister. No understanding of macroeconomics at all. Just she knows that there's money to be taken and redistributed to, they picture themselves probably even as Robin Hood, even though Robin Hood actually was stealing taxes back from the government and giving it back to the people who the government had taken it from in the first place. That's where all the leftists, they draw this parallel to Robin Hood. It's actually not true. Robin Hood was taking money back from the government, stealing it back from the sheriff who was collecting it in taxes and giving it back to the people. So he wasn't robbing from the rich and giving to the poor. He was robbing from the government. He was taking your own money back and giving it back to the people. Anyway, sorry about that little rant there. So it says here, a Liberal associate of Freeland's who has worked closely with her has said, quote, She is a social interventionist activist, so she believes in the power of government and also believes in the redirection of funds to those who need it most. What gives them the right to decide who needs my money? So this may be a turning point for this country. I think as Canadians, we need to decide whether it's the federal government's job to play, God with our money and give money that they take from hardworking people to people who don't want to work. I mean, there's always going to be a social safety net here in Canada for people who can't work or are unable to work. Nobody's arguing that. But as a libertarian, the line of thought that the government even is thinking of this it's vile. It's anathema, really. So, in my opinion, the Liberals will use the age-old trick of promising people money for votes, pretty much. People don't vote, people vote with their wallets these days, right? What's the government going to give me? The Maritimes made that blatantly clear in the last federal election. Trudeau promised to keep their EI or boost their EI, and bang, he carried every riding in the East. So they prove it, and most of the people in this country will probably do the same. The Liberal government will probably also paint any opposition to these measures as uncaring, greedy, and selfish. But I got a question for everyone, and I got a question that you can ask people who you may get into discussions or arguments with about this. Is it greedy to want to keep the fruits of your own labor, that you risked your capital to start your business, or you put your life on hold to go to school and better yourself in the labor market to get a better wage for your labor? Or is it greedy of the people who didn't bother doing that, to depend on the government to come and take your money by force on pain of death? And then people say, whoa, that's hyperbolic. What do you mean death? Why are you talking like that? Well, if you don't pay your taxes, you go to jail. And if you resist going to jail, they can shoot you. The government is the biggest, most organized gang in the country, and they can kill you if you don't comply. So on pain of death, they're going to come and take money from people who've earned it and give it to people who don't want to or are unwilling to work. The social programs we have can be beefed up if they're not paying the people enough who can't work. There's a differentiation between people who can't work and people who don't want to work, and people who just haven't bothered to better themselves. I went to school. I put my life on hold. I borrowed the money for the tuition, which I'm paying back. I got my ticket, and I went to work in the blistering heat and the freezing cold so I could earn a wage and support my family. And a guy who just wants to go work at McDonald's or the Max and says that it's not a living wage, well, guess what? It's never meant to be a living wage. A minimum wage job is supposed to help you as you have roommates and stuff like that. You have to live like that until you can better yourself. It's called meritocracy. Especially for the business owners. They risk their capital. They risk everything starting these businesses. They pay the payroll taxes for their employees. They pay the insurance, all that stuff. And at the end of the day, the government then comes along and says, no, you make too much, and takes it from you. And they say this is all in the name of fairness. What's fair about that? What is fair about that? So here's a quote that I think everyone should really pay attention to and listen to and use in any kind of arguments or debates you're having with people who are on the other side. And it goes, quote, "You cannot legislate the poor into prosperity by legislating the wealthy out of prosperity. What one person receives without working for, another person must work for without receiving." I'm going to say that again. What one person receives without working for, another person must work for without receiving. Think about that. The government cannot give to anybody anything that the government does not first take from somebody else. The government cannot give to anybody anything that the government does not first take from somebody else. Okay, those are two poignant lines that I had to repeat. He goes on to say, when half of the people get the idea that they do not have to work because the other half is going to take care of them, and when the other half gets the idea that it does no good to work because nobody else is going to get what they work for, that somebody else is going to get what they work for, that, my dear friend, is the beginning of the end of any nation. You cannot multiply wealth by dividing it. You cannot multiply wealth by dividing it. So what the young people have to understand out of that quote is that the government does not produce anything. The government does not have any money that it doesn't first take from hardworking taxpayers. So what are the possibilities coming out of this? Number one, the budget passes. Canada moves further to the left towards open communism, and the west of this country is further alienated, and our separatist movement gains strength. So I'm whatever, right? I want out, so this is actually a good thing for the separatists. The budget is rejected, an election is held, Trudeau wins again, possibly with a majority this time, and the budget is rammed through. See above. Communism light, and our movement will gather strength. And then the third possibility is the government falls on the rejection of the budget and is replaced by another government, probably the Conservatives, and things will kind of continue on with the Conservatives, who are basically liberal light, until the next liberal government comes along and pushes everything further to the left. So, if Canada wants to move to these extremes, then we here in Alberta have a duty to our children and future generations to maintain what little freedom we have left and form our own republic. Saskatchewan, BC, Manitoba, and even parts of Western Ontario should hold plebiscites by county or region if necessary to join us as they see fit. Meritocracy is the base of prosperity. Without meritocracy, you cannot have a prosperous society. We can move forward together, united in our strengths, and steer our own independent path to the future. It's wide open. We just have to do it. Support the movement, spread the word, and we can control our own destiny. Take it easy.